Hello, everybody, and welcome again to Procrastinator's Pit Stop. We have another amazing guest for you today. We are with Elisa Lindstrom. Elisa is a therapist turned declutter coach who helps people break free from overwhelming clutter by exploring the deeper emotional roots behind their attachment to items. She guides clients to reconnect with their authentic selves so their homes become true reflections of who they are. Elisa, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Chris.
Thank you so much for being here. It's actually a really good time of year to be discussing this as we're ushering in a bunch of new things to compound with the old things. And it's a very interesting topic. But before we get into that, we do like to have an icebreaker on the show. And the question for you today was, which cartoon character do you resonate with the most and why?
So I was a latchkey kid, and I would come home from school and turn on TV, right? And I watched a lot of, this was in the a lot of American, I don't know if it was also in Canada, but She-Ra and He-Man were on a lot. And so was G.I. Joe. I think the character I resonated with the most was on G.I. Joe. It was Lady Jane. I think that's her name. Was it Lady Jane? I can't remember. You didn't watch it?
No, I was more of a Garfield and Friends and Ghostbusters kid.
Well, yeah, Ghostbusters and Garfield. I think that those were on Saturday mornings. I can't remember. Anyway, so I really resonated with her. I was a little mini feminist, I guess, back then, and really appreciated a strong woman, which we didn't see a whole lot. By that time, there wasn't tons of women that were strong and in the army, even if it was a cartoon army back then. So yeah, that's who I looked up to when I was growing up, coming home from school, making my dinners by myself.
Okay, well, thanks for sharing that. It definitely is an interesting one. Takes it back quite a bit.
Yeah.
Never really watched the show a lot, but did see a few episodes of it. Okay, so just moving in here to procrastination.
Yes.
How would you define procrastination, Lisa? And what does it mean to you personally?
Good question. So, as you said, I was a therapist. So I see procrastination from a therapy point of view of an avoidance of something, or maybe, there's so many different reasons people procrastinate. It could be anxiety based. It could be ADHD based. It could be I would say mostly it would be anxiety based, but there's so many reasons someone, fear based of being scared of what happens when you do make a change or when you do something. Those would be the biggest things I would say, but I'm sure that there's millions of reasons why people procrastinate. And each person is different, right? So they've got a different reason for it. And what was the second question that you had? I can't hear you.
And how would you define it personally for yourself?
Personally,
How does it
you're
touch?
when I procrastinate, because I do procrastinate. I procrastinate a lot. It's when I procrastinate, it's fear-based. It's stepping out of a comfort zone. Even if it's something really small, yeah, I notice that I procrastinate a lot when I don't want to do something, then I go off and do something else.
Well, I mean that's pretty common to most people. I mean, I mean, I've certainly known to look at loads of laundry and said, "Hey, look at that," and then maybe notification comes in. Oh, look at that! Somebody posted a cat video on some platform. We should probably check that out. That sounds important. I mean, it's important enough for a text message. It's probably pretty important.
Right, right. Absolutely.
And so, why don't you tell us a little bit about your journey and how you got to be to where you are today? Because you went from therapist to declutter coach. So, how did you get there?
Yeah. So I became a therapist and I actually burnt out. I was working with domestic violence and other sorts of trauma, and I burnt out. I got married, and we were living in New York City at the time, and we moved to Chicago for various reasons, one of which was to have a family. What happened was I decided to let go of my license as a therapist and to focus all of my attention on raising our child. And this is where decluttering comes in. So I let go of my therapy degree or my licensing, and we were living in a 900 square foot condo with a toddler, and we had a lot of stuff. And so I tried desperately to declutter. And every time I decluttered, it didn't feel like it was enough. It didn't feel like I was getting anywhere. I was reading all different types of decluttering books and blogs. And I don't think podcasts were out then, but I got really into minimalism and nothing seemed to be enough. And then it turns out that then he and I got divorced. And after the divorce, I did my own self-reflection journey. And in that, I started bringing in everything from what I had known from therapy and everything I had known from all of the research I had done on decluttering. And I combined all three of those together, and I was able to really declutter for the first time in a very kind way to myself, in a very calm way, in a very authentic way, so that it wasn't, very strict and rigid, and there weren't a lot of shoulds. And it also worked with my procrastination. And when I was doing that, a lot of my friends started asking me for help. And then that sort of led into me becoming a declutter coach.
Interesting, and thank you for sharing that. It is interesting how we can, be so attached to certain things. I noticed that even myself, growing up, one of my things was, I wanted to make sure all my toys could fit everywhere all the time, right? And then as you get older, you get into like, maybe not necessarily minimalism, but you want to get rid of some things. And we do hold on to a lot of things that I guess can cause us, a lot of guilt, right? Because I'll give you one example right now, and I should not be keeping it for many reasons. I do still have my late father's gold wristwatch, right? It's been in a bag, like inside a nice little purple bag, and wrapped inside a plastic bag. Probably, I want to say it was maybe even in there. Um, I don't remember if it was in there before my father passed away or not, but I mean, now it's just sitting in a drawer, right? And I hold on to it because I've got that, I don't know, almost like that sense of obligation to hold on to it, right? So do you think that's a reason why we tend to hold on to many things, even if we don't even realize it, we're holding on to it because of some external reason rather than an internal reason?
So it's so varied for every single person for why we hold on to it, why we would hold on to something. I would say for some people, yes, we hold on to it because we feel like we should. And for other people, they hold on to it because they actually do have a connection with, for instance, the watch. I think it just completely varies. The question actually that I have for you, and I know that we didn't say that this was what was going to happen with this podcast episode, but why is it you feel like you shouldn't have it? Because you don't love it, or because you're muted again?
I apologize. Tech today has been great. No, it's so I haven't really thought that much about it, but I shouldn't have it because one, it's not working. It's broken. I need to take it somewhere to get it clean, to get it in working order again. Again, it's been in that bag now for, I don't even know. It's been at least 3 years, and since before that, I mean, my father passed in 2015, so it's probably hasn't seen the light of day in almost 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's not providing any function. I don't really think about it on a daily basis. It's there, but I don't think about it on a daily basis. It's well, again, it's broken, so it's really of no use to anybody. Really, I haven't really analyzed why I'm keeping it, but those are definitely the reasons I shouldn't be keeping it because, again, it's just taking up space and providing no real value or even connection, I could say. I mean, I had some ideas of like maybe getting it like put in one of those cubes like a baseball, but never got around to it really.
Yeah. So some people do hold on to something like that because there is a connection that's really strong. Like they remember their dad always wearing that watch and coming home from work. And they would always put that watch on. And they remember growing up watching their dad getting ready for work, putting on the watch. And there was like this big thing for them, that would be one reason why someone would hold on to a watch. Or maybe there's something about the watch that just brings comfort to the person keeping it, So it's both. If you don't feel any love for the watch, there's no connection to your dad with it, then yeah, maybe you can let go of it. But if it's something that you really feel connected to and you really do wish you could go and get it fixed and then find a cube or wear it or, somehow do something so you can see it and it's not in a plastic bag was it a purple bag, a plastic bag, purple bag?
It's a plastic bag inside a purple bag. It's a nice purple bag. It's a plastic bag inside a purple bag inside a drawer. It's actually right
Right,
behind me.
right. So, but everyone has their own story, right? Everyone has their own reason for holding on to something. And the key is not to should ourselves of, oh, we're not using it, so we should get rid of it, but more of exploring why it is we're holding on to it in the first place. And maybe it's a case of letting it go. And maybe it's a case of holding on to it longer and doing something so that it's not hiding away and we can't appreciate it.
No, and I mean, and see, I think that's kind of my main thing right now with it too, is that it's there, and I don't like. It's funny, like I think the last time I even really thought about it was months ago, maybe. And it's in passing as I open the drawer, it's like, oh yeah, that's still there. But again, just the idea of spring cleaning or spring decluttering or I guess fall decluttering. So many of us put that off. And do you think it's because of the connection to those things, or is it just because it seems too daunting to start?
I think most of it is that it's too daunting. I think that our culture is very into let's declutter and spend the entire weekend taking everything out and putting it all out in front of ourselves. That's overwhelming. Like the thought of pulling everything out of even just a closet and sorting through it, that would make me procrastinate for sure. There's no reason we do that to ourselves. And the only time I would say that someone should do that or could do that is if they had someone with them, like a coach or a friend who is very neutral and can help them sort through everything. But attacking clutter or, going at clutter and thinking of it as a huge project is just setting yourself up for procrastination, because there's who would you rather go hang out with friends or stay at home and sort through a closet? I mean, we're setting ourselves up for not doing it. And yeah, for sure, there is a part of it of oh, and then I'm going to have to look at great Aunt D's collection of X, Y, and Z that I've had for 20 years that I was just given, and I don't want to deal with that. There's that too. But I think the majority of it is that we are sort of being told by media and, TV shows and everything, take everything out and spread it all out in front of you and go through it. That's just so overwhelming. We're setting ourselves up in a bad way.
I find the contrast really interesting though, too, especially as you talk about society. I mean, we are both at once kind of, we should save everything in case we need it. But we are also in a disposable society where most things are made and don't have a shelf life past 2 years now.
Absolutely.
So how do we, get that? I know Marie Kondo she's pretty popular, so I have a rule where if I have a box and I don't know what's in it and I've had it for like a year, and definitely if I'm moving and that box hasn't been moved from the last move, it gets left at the other place. Because obviously, if I haven't opened the box in a year, I probably don't need it. Where do you stand on some of those? I know some of them are a little more drastic, some of them are a little less drastic. I mean, some people say if they haven't looked at it or used it in 3 months, it's gone.
Right. And again, I think that this is all decluttering and clutter and items and everything. It's not one size fits all, right? So, and I think that there's a spectrum, right, of people who don't feel connection to items. And it's very easy to say, if I haven't used it in 3 months or 6 months, I don't need it. I was having lunch with a friend, and he goes through he has a box of sentimental items, and every year he goes through them and gets rid of more of them. And it's not even a big box. And the rest of his house is completely minimalist, right? And that's one end of the spectrum, and that's perfectly fine. That's perfectly fine. If that's who he is and that's who his partner is, then that's great. That's who they are. And I'm glad that they are who they are, and that's how they are. But then, of course, there's the extreme opposite of it, of it's almost like people who grew up during the Depression, which would be more like our grandparents, right? And our great grandparents and stuff like that. But they have, they kept string in case they needed it, right? Because of that extreme opposite. And I think we all fall somewhere between the two. We just need to find out where it is and what makes us the most comfortable, and when I say that, I don't mean, I don't want to give someone who may be more holding on to everything out of fear and scarcity. I don't want to give them like a free pass, like sort of search, like do a lot of looking into who you are and why is it you're holding on to this? Why is it it's easy for you to let go of it? Do you regret letting go of things? I've had people come up to me and say, I am a minimalist, and 3 months after I've let go of something, I realize I needed it and I regret it. And honestly, I have gone through photos, and then, a year or two later, I regret it. I regret some of the photos I've let go of. And they're not even from now. They're from, the 80s and 90s before digital. So there's no way I can get them again. So, yeah, I feel like it's just such a spectrum of people. And the important part is to really connect with who you are and what's important to you and what your story is with the stuff.
And, and I love that you go into the authenticity. It is so important. One of the things, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong, you're the expert here, there seems to be a correlation between space and stuff. So when you were mentioning in your story, you moved back to a 900 square foot apartment. I imagine you lived in a place that was bigger at one point, right?
No, we were living in New York, so we didn't. Okay. All of a sudden that must have been 750 square feet when we were living in New York, right after we got married. Adding a toddler, having a baby and a toddler, and the amount of stuff that comes with that people just give you, that we were even trying to say, we don't need all of this stuff, but people are just like, oh no, you need this. It was just a lot of stuff. So, yeah.
No, I was just thinking about the sort of the alignment between, if you have a bigger house, if it's empty, then you have to fill it. Sort of sometimes we feel like we need to fill space because
absolutely.
If space exists, something should be in it. Do you run across that a lot
I've run across that with friends who've, they've bought a house for themselves and they've had extra rooms, and then they're like, oh, well, I need to fill this room. And I've heard stories of it. I don't really find that when I'm working with clients, but I think it is a situation. And again, we need to figure out what we're comfortable with, because, if we're not comfortable with empty space, then why are we getting such a huge house that maybe we don't need all of those rooms? Like, what's behind that? Is that a status thing? What's the story behind us needing to have a big house that we don't have the stuff for, that we don't feel comfortable with empty space? But here's this big house with tons of empty space. Like, what's going on for us with that's bringing us down that path? And I'm not saying it's bad. Like, if you grew up and you really wanted to always have a big house, and you finally get to a point where you've worked hard and you've bought this big house with tons of rooms, and it makes you feel good to be able to walk through your house with all of these rooms, then that's who you are. That's not how I live, but that's how if that's how you live, then that's great, as long as you can really understand that that's where you're coming from.
And so I guess an interesting sub question to that might be, you talk about declutter, but have you ever run across where you need to, I'm not going to say reclutter because it sounds like you're throwing stuff everywhere, but Have you ever come across where you're coaching people on how to put things into a space that's empty, or is it more just declutter?
Yeah, most of it's decluttering, but I am working with a friend who is in the middle of a divorce and had to pretty much start over. And so she and I have been talking about space. Now she works with interior designer, so we're not talking about that kind of stuff, but just sort of thinking about, well, what would make this space authentic to you, and what are some things that are important to you, and talking about these, and bringing in from the original house that she and her husband had, like, what is the art that's important to you? What is, like, making this new space a complete reflection of who she is and what her values are. So in that sense, we are recluttering, as you said, in a way. Yeah. Yeah.
No, I just find it interesting too. And so I would imagine one of the first things that you do with clients is, would that first step be to take a look around and just say, what is actually serving me and what's not serving me? Is that sort of the first step? Take like a mental checklist of everything around if you think it's cluttered.
Yeah, that's a good first step. That's a good first step. I would say even just go into a specific room, and you can pick whatever room it is, and just sort of take a moment, and maybe if you're a procrastinator, set a timer for 15 minutes. That's like a big thing that I do with my clients, that when they're working on their own and not one-on-one with me, but like they live all over the world. And this is what I would suggest: set a timer for 15 minutes, and sure, go into the room and see what is it you want this room to be? What's in this room that's serving that? What's not serving that? What's serving you? What's not serving you? Absolutely. That's a great way to start. And then spend 15 minutes a day sorting through that room, not taking everything out at once, but like one drawer at a time, one box at a time, one closet shelf or whatever at a time. Don't take everything out, because that's just going to make it so much worse, especially if you're a procrastinator.
Well, I can tell you one of my personal experiences too, where it's like, okay, I'm gonna get my workspace cleaned up, and it's not horrible, right? But I found myself going through it and saying, nope, this has got to stay. Nope, this has got to stay. And at the end of it, I think it took about 2 hours, and everything was exactly the same way. So I'm not sure if you'd consider that a success or
Well, I mean, what it did was it let you know that everything that you thought you didn't need, you actually do need.
it did. But it gets me remembering too. I guess this goes into things like even as parents, right? We might want to keep. Now there are parents that keep every single thing from their kids, and then there are parents that kind of don't keep everything, but they keep it long enough to not say, oh, hey, little Toby, little Aaron, this is nice, but it's going up on the fridge today. Tomorrow it's going in the trash heap. I guess that might play something into it. Do you ever guide people in extra storage options? I mean, is extra storage even something that we should consider, or do you think, are you more of the thought that whatever we need, we can sort of have with us, kind of at all times. We don't need to have a storage unit across town.
I definitely am not a huge fan of storage units. I think that they do serve a good purpose when you are, um, maybe you are living overseas and you have maybe a storage unit of all of your stuff. So you can live overseas and then you still have, a space that's yours with your stuff in it. Generally, I would say, I don't know about, throwing away from a therapist point of view, letting your child put their artwork up and then throwing it away the next day. That might create a little bit of trauma for the child about how much you adore or whatever, respect their art or respect them or whatever. I don't even go in there. Um, there are solutions. So let's just stick with the art on the fridge. What you could do is, if you didn't want your fridge to be overwhelmed with art, you could say, okay, we're going to pick one of your pieces a week, and we'll put it up. And then when all of the other art, we'll have this one box for it and we'll put it in this box. And then if you have the money for it, there are things where there's a company that you have a box of art and you send it to them and they make it into a book. And we actually did that in my house. So they do a great job of it. And so there are and you could do it yourself if you really wanted to and you had that kind of time. But there are options for keeping all of the art if you wanted to, or keeping your favorites, like you and your child or you and your children can pick your favorite art and then make a book of it. So there's always a solution to things if we want to keep them. There's always a solution without having to get a full storage across town.
Well, I know that this one's going to resonate a lot with the parents because and again, I've got like 6 things from my daughter laying around here already. But, they make a lot of stuff and they put a lot of work into it. And, like you said, we don't, we're not mean. We don't want to, immediately say that there's no room for it. But at what point, I don't know if you have an opinion on this, but at what point is it all right to sit down with your child and say, you've done so many great things. You're going to do way more great things, but we need to, do we have that conversation or we just quietly let them forget about it and then
I come from the camp of really empowering your child on decisions of what to keep and what to let go of. Unless your child is under a year old, I mean, toddlers probably aren't the best to go and ask these questions to. But, once they are in nursery school, preschool, and definitely once they're in grade school, after the age 5 for sure, having a conversation, maybe, depending on how prolific they are with their arts and crafts, maybe it's every 6 months, or maybe it's just once a year. Maybe you guys decide, okay, it's the end of the school year. Let's look at all of your art and find our favorites and let them pick their favorites and you can pick your favorites. And maybe you have a limit to how many art pieces there are. And you can do this with toys too, right? Like you can definitely, one thing that I did and one thing I taught is that you have a bin of all the toys and you say, okay, pick your 10 or 20 favorite toys and everything else goes in the bin. And then when you want to switch, you swap them out, right? So once a week, maybe you'd swap out a toy for another toy. Just as a way to keep the clutter at bay, but not getting rid of all the toys.
But thankfully or not thankfully, I don't think we'll have to worry about that too much because it seems now kids tend to prefer tablets and stuff where they have digital clutter instead of regular.
Oh, right. True. Yeah. My child is 16. So we kind of didn't really have that as an issue.
No, now it's more about 700 apps that you have to verify that they're using or not using. Kind of makes you miss the toys some days. So all that fun stuff. And and I'm sure this comes up, right? So if I really like something, but somebody else really doesn't like something, then do you err more on the compromise of trying to keep that said thing or trying to let that thing go?
I think it really depends on the people in the home, like what the relationship is and how the communication is and understanding both, like having both people discuss where they're coming from with why they like it or why they don't like it. What about it resonates with them? What doesn't? And finding a way to respect both people's feelings about the item, right? Like, let's just say it's a art piece of, I'm trying to think of something that people either love or hate. Like what is it? The dogs playing poker.
Well, I can give you a real example. That'll help.
Okay.
Real example is my daughter made a really great, well, I think it was really great. My wife thought it was really great. Like a self-portrait, like a drawn portrait of the Grinch. We even got it framed. We got it framed. I mean, put it up there because it was really good. And, my daughter is of the mind that, oh, I hate it, get rid of it. And
right.
my wife is all, she wants to keep it. I'm on the fence about it, like I'd kind of like to see it stay, but it's not going to kill me if it goes.
So the thing is kids change their minds about things. And sometimes when they hate it, it's because they're embarrassed about it, even if it's really good. And they don't see it as being good. They see all the imperfections of it. So I would almost, in the case of it being the child that wants it gone, of their own artwork that may or may not be actually really great, most likely is pretty cool. Is it up on the wall right now, or is it?
It's just it floats around, it's in our room most of the time, but because it was Christmas, we brought it out, on the little stairway there.
Yeah. I mean, I would almost say hold on to it, but don't bring it out, and just ask every Christmas, is it okay for us to bring out the Grinch? Because it makes, your wife likes it, right? It brings her joy, but you could also respect your daughter's wishes of not having it out.
Yeah, that makes clutter sound
That makes what?
complicated.
It's very complicated. That's the other reason why sometimes it's easier to procrastinate than because it's a lot of decisions that have to be made. And that is really hard to want to jump up off the couch from watching, kitten videos to doing something where you have to sit there and sort through and figure out, make all these decisions, bring everyone that lives in the home, their thoughts and needs and worries into every decision. Some of it's easy, but some of it's really not. And it's very easy to want to procrastinate when you're doing that because it's not easy.
Well, this has been a really great conversation, Elisa. We are coming up pretty close to the time. Was there anything that you wish I would have asked that I didn't ask, or anything that you feel we should have covered but didn't cover today?
No, I feel like we covered a lot. We went over a lot of stuff.
Well, once again, thank you so much for being on the show. And to all our listeners, we are going to place the website in the show description as well. So don't have to worry about that. And just once again, thank you for being on the show, Elisa. And thank you to our listeners for tuning in. And if you can't find that motivation or inspiration for yourself today, maybe just go out and try to be that motivation, inspiration for someone else. And we'll see you again next time.